When it comes to soft drinks, we all have our own favorites. But for most people, the choice is easy when it comes to the best black-colored soft drink. It's either Pepsi or Coca-Cola. The Coca-Cola Company arguably took one of the biggest risks in consumer goods history, which is fixing something that was not broken in the first place. The taste of Coca-Cola is quite strange. When it's ice cold, you would love it, but when it's warm, it tastes awful. When it's flat without all the carbon dioxide, it's just a sugary water. With the right temperature, Coke tastes better than most soft drinks out there. But the company once made a huge mistake some time ago. Something that could have cost everything for them, and you might never have a Coke again in your life. So what is this mistake that Coke made that could have cost them the company itself? Well, that's what we discuss in today's video. So make sure to stick around till the end to learn a lot more about Coca-Cola's biggest mistake that might have compromised the company's future. When John Pemberton locked himself up in a lab trying to find a substitute for his morphine addiction, he must have been totally clueless about the fact that he was about to create an American symbol, something that would be a fan favorite worldwide. Today, people are very familiar with that distinctive red and white Coke logo, and it has always been a household name ever since its inception. The drink originated in 1886, but it didn't really take off for almost 10 years. Pemberton already spent more than 2 decades crafting a decent replacement for morphine, and that's when in 1885, French wine Coca was born. Yes, it was a mix of cocaine and alcohol, but all thanks to several social stigmas, we finally got an alcohol-free version, which was also a necessity, and that drink is now known as Coca-Cola. He was clearly not much into the financial potential of his invention, most probably because of his health conditions. Things only changed when a Mississippi businessman, Asa Griggs Candler, found a way to bottle the drink as well as secure a trademark and design the very famous Coke bottle that we now know today. Coke was then launched overseas by the mid-1920s, and the company subsequently acquired Minute Maid and Sprite in the early 1960s. The American Dream Plan really worked, and it helped him sell the company for tons of money. The new owners of Coca-Cola then brought in several changes, like diversifying the packaging and acquiring several other companies. But one thing they never dared to do was to change the original recipe of Pemberton, and when they did, it was Coca-Cola's worst year, and that year was 1985. During the 1980s, Coca-Cola was comfortably dominant, but a new player brought in more friction for the company as Pepsi was betting on a superior taste. At the time, Pepsi was overtaking Coca-Cola in the rankings, which threatened Coke's valuable market share. New Coke wasn't a shot across the bow in the intense cola warfare of the 1980s. It was intended to strike directly. To deal with the competition, Coca-Cola decided to change their 100-year-old recipe. You might think a move like this might have taken the company to new heights. Yes, it did, but not in the ways you would imagine it to be. This move was not welcomed by any of the Coke fans. If you think that the company was just trying to launch a new flavor, well, that's not the case because they tried to change the original flavor forever, starting April 23, 1985, and Coca-Cola became the new Coke. With the new formula, Coca-Cola already convinced themselves they had a superior recipe by conducting careful taste tests with the help of 200,000 consumers, and they concluded that their new formula is better than Pepsi and much better than the original Pemberton's recipe. The sales did go up for a while, and consumers praised the new taste, including several celebrities. But later, the company faced a huge backlash. This backlash resulted in several furious and depressed customers spamming the hotlines and filling Coca-Cola's mailbox with thousands of letters. One of those letters even addressed the CEO, and it was quite surprising when they found out that the sender of the letter was asking for an autograph, not because they were a huge fan of the CEO. All they wanted was the signature of one of the dumbest executives in American business history, and that signature might be worth a fortune in the future. When the taste change was announced, so many consumers panicked, and they started filling their basements with cases of Coke. A man in San Antonio drove all the way to a local bottler and purchased about $1,000 worth of Coca-Cola. Some people even got depressed over the fact that they will no longer have the option to drink their favorite drink, and suddenly people started remembering how Coca-Cola used to taste like. This might have been the best time for them to realize how important of a role a drink played in their life. Not just that, People even began their protest in the streets of Atlanta. One fan even went as far as founding Old Coca-Cola Drinkers of America Association and convinced 60,000 others to join him to showcase several anti-Coke sentiments, and went on to file a lawsuit. The pressure from the press and the fans eventually became too much. The CEO realized his mistake, and within 79 days after the launch of the new Coke, they finally announced the comeback of the old flavor, and they labeled it Coca-Cola Classic. In 1985, Coca-Cola began to show signs of vulnerability when it released an ad with Donald Keough, the company's longtime president. "We're bringing it back. The original taste of Coca-Cola returns as Coca-Cola Classic. And soon America will have a real choice, the new taste of Coke or the original taste of Coca-Cola Classic," said Donald Keough, president of Coca-Cola Company. By the end of 1985, the sales of the Classic Coke outnumbered both the new Coke and Pepsi. 6 months later, Coca-Cola sales were at more than twice the rate of Pepsi. So why exactly did that happen? Well, it could be because of the fact that people tend to appreciate something more when they can no longer have it, because of which people might have missed the original taste and remember how much they loved it. So they went back to grab some of the Coca-Cola Classic bottles, which revived Coca-Cola's cash flow. Keep in mind that when Coca-Cola decided to change its original formula, it was already 99 years old, and the company informed the media that it was just reducing its formula to suit modern taste buds. The new Coke, according to several reports, tasted a lot better than Pepsi. So why did Coca-Cola go with such a bold move in the first place? Well, the new formula could have saved Coke about $50 million per year by cutting down on some of the more costly ingredients, which means Coca-Cola tried to turn its back on the very thing that made it great in the first place. The new Coke was a lot sweeter and lighter according to several critiques, but most of them just complained that it just tasted like classic Coca-Cola that was diluted by melting ice. The new Coke was ultimately killed off in 2002, even though the new Coke was available in various avatars along with the Classic Coke. Now, some of you might be thinking, was this a genius marketing move by Coca-Cola? Well, we don't think so. This was a proper mistake, but with a very fortunate ending. You cannot deny the fact that Coke's CEO, Roberto Goizueta, took a very bold decision, something that nobody attempted in a century. But he was also smart enough to address his mistake at the right time. So what can we learn from this? Well, if you're a business owner, you could learn a few things from this mishap. Pleasing customers might not always be about rational choices, because it's clear that the new Coke formula tasted much better than the older one. It was the emotional value attached to the classic formula that made people miss the original drink, as people valued their emotions more than what it actually tasted like. Coca-Cola was also trying to stay relevant, especially because of the competition, which can backfire heavily if it's not done right. Coke tried to outdo themselves by creating a recipe that's much better than what the competition had to offer. It will do a lot of benefits in most cases, but when it comes to Coke, people loved the original formula, and people wanted Coke to stay true to its roots. This incident also shows us that it's okay to make mistakes as long as you're ready to take a step back after a mistake, because it will only remain as a failure if you're not ready to do anything about it. So Coca-Cola just got lucky with this failure, and it was never an intended genius move. This mistake is still taught in several business schools, and as this is a great case study where you could derive a lot of insights from. Ultimately, the events of 1985 profoundly altered the dynamics of the soft drink business and the prosperity of the Coca-Cola Corporation, and the Coca-Cola brand reached new heights, all because of their loyal customers who continued to recall their love for Coca-Cola.